had a couple of building fires that were quite well documented in the media. We also had building collapses, as I just mentioned now, we had one 2 days ago. And these things continue to happen, even though we're trying very hard. The biggest issue for us, though, was the end of apartheid, which I'm sure you know. The official end of apartheid was with our 1994 elections, which was 19 years ago, almost 2 decades. And with that came a new government. And obviously with new governments comes new legislation. So we had new legislation written on occupational health and safety, and additions to existing legislation. So like Bangladesh, you do have health and safety legislation. We did have something to start with, but we then built on that. And from that came new building codes, Mine Health and Safety Act, specifically for mining activities, building, factory, fire, all the rest, and exactly the same way. And for me, it was a big turn for us because we started being more aware of the fact that we have an international eye on us. When the end of apartheid came, sanctions were lifted, and we were allowed to now trade with foreign investors and trade internationally again. But again, there comes a condition on that. If you're going to trade internationally, you have to have certain standards in place. And so more and more these foreign investors put pressure on us to implement better labor practices, better wage control, and obviously better health and safety. And for me, I think that was also a boom in our industry and in our country at the time, because with the change in our nation in terms of the end of apartheid, it also had an improvement in the basic labor standards of the organization. And ever since then, yes, we're battling with sort of the speed bumps along the way, but ever increasingly things are improving, and it's a very great place to be at the moment to see how things are improving on an almost daily basis. Alright, so I'm going to talk a little bit about OSHA's 18001. Has anyone here heard of OSHA's 18001? Alright, OSHA's 18001 stands for Occupational Health and Safety Assessment Series. It is basically the international benchmark for occupational health and safety standards. It's the basic accepted norm across the globe for institutions that want to do foreign trade and be involved in foreign investment and exports, etc. in terms of having what is known as an acceptable health and safety standard. Now, OSHA's 18001 is a voluntary specification standard that you can opt into. Obviously, very key benefits. Right? It is synonymous for improving even in Bangladesh, some of the organizations that you guys have implemented OSHA's 18001 system and decreasing fatalities, workplace incidences, unhealthy and unsafe work practices has been drastic to the point where they're winning awards and they're being renowned in the media. So it speaks for itself, but again, it has its challenges and its effects in terms of incidents. Now, OSHA's 18001 has also been paired with two other standards, one of them being ISO 9000, which is the quality management system, and ISO 14000, which is the environmental management system. Now, obviously, when you're thinking health and safety, it's just the next step to think about environmental safety. Just the next step to make sure that the product that you're using is quality and not harmful to the people that you're using it for. So these three have been designed to go together, and usually most organizations choose to implement a combination of the three. And again, benefits are, I can't talk enough about the benefits. But the key to health and safety in all of this is looking at the bigger picture. And I know downstairs we were talking about the bigger picture, looking at urbanization in the bigger picture. But the health and safety of people is a bigger picture. The problem with the situation is that when you think about one worker that becomes ill or dies and can no longer work, there's a number of family members and dependents who are bereft. Obviously, they've lost their family member, but often they're destitute. Now, in South Africa, we have multiple homes that have one single breadwinner. And what happens when that one single breadwinner is taken out? That's it for that family. They are destitute. When you have one building that collapses, that's fine. One fire that breaks out, that's fine. But what about all the other buildings that are still at risk? Still could have these things happening in the country, right? My best, and it happens in South Africa a lot, one person gets injured in a workplace, and the employer gives every piece of personal protective equipment, dust masks, and earplugs, and goggles, and hard hats, and boots, and everything. Have you solved the problem? You haven't solved the problem. This is purely reactional. Right? This is not focusing on the deeper disease and symptoms, which are unsafe and unhealthy workplaces. Right? By implementing an occupational health and safety system in any organization, as I said, the benefits are endless. Combined with the quality management system, you have a really good benefit system for both the organization itself, the community that surrounds that organization, and the individual. Right. Just to talk about this as well, one of the biggest issues with health and safety standards is that organizations like to see quick fix. They want the problem solved now. international development partners, foreign investors, people want to see quick fix results. They want to see solutions now. But with implementing any health and safety standard, it takes time, and there has to be patience. And unfortunately, in today's society, there's not enough patience. As we heard downstairs, it's all about speed, it's all about how quickly we can get things done. And if you're patient and you stay the course and you implement the system properly and maintain it over time, the benefits are innumerable. And at the end of the day, we can focus on the bigger picture about not just the safer worker or the safer workplace or the organization or the community. We can start making the entire area around that work, and I use work as a sort of a verb there, making sure that that work that we do is beneficial to all. Now, I just wanted to outline the different benefits, right? So, the benefits for the organization are the following. Obviously, by implementing any management system, but specifically OSHA's 18001, is increased legal compliance, obviously beneficial for you. I don't know what it's like here in Bangladesh, but in South Africa, if you aren't compliant with the law, you get prohibition notices and fines from the departments, depending on what they are. So legal compliance, decreased occupational injuries, diseases, fatalities, more efficient and effective work, because people are not afraid for their lives and not afraid for their health while doing work. They are more productive and more enthusiastic about their work. You also have compliance to working procedures, because if people know that by doing something this way, they will not be injured, they will comply with it. They won't deviate from the law. Further to this, the organization itself becomes more competitive in the business world because it's having a more effective and efficient production line. Less injuries, less negative publicity, all of that comes with injuries and incidents. For the community which surrounds that organization, it's obviously a healthier and safer organization working there. Less pollution, less effluent, less ozone and water pollution. Also, the organization will often employ from that local community, which means if you're having less incidents and less fatalities, the community is going to feel safer in itself because there's not going to be injuries and fatalities that are commonplace. There's going to be support for that organization, a positive review of that organization. And then finally, the benefit of employees and individuals is obviously completely logical. There's injuries, there's fatalities, but I think focusing also more on the health aspect of it, which is organization. Alright? International certifications obviously help, but the issue here is local legislation. OSHA 18001 is framed around local legislation. So I think in Bangladesh, and this is just purely my opinion, so if anyone takes offense, please don't, I feel like legislation doesn't need to be changed, it just needs to be tweaked. And that's what we did in South Africa. We took what we had, which was a good base, and we just added little bits that we increased control more specifically. So for example, you had an increase in fire prevention acts and laws since the recent fires. That's a good thing. Let's tweak it. Let's go the next level up. Let's make health and safety more of a priority in specific industries and specific workplaces. And obviously, support for this is in the staff in that organization. Training is required. Alright, I'll just talk. Training for government officials is critical in this way because how are you going to enforce legislation if you don't have somebody in the department who can go and check compliance? So we have a skills program in South Africa where we upskill our government department employees to go and check workplaces for compliance and to enforce it by giving notices and prohibitions and fines. At the end of the day, that's the first step, government increase in terms of legislation and compliance. And the second one is in the organization itself. Most companies think that lower-level training of health and safety is the key. My experience in terms of years of implementing OSHA's 18000 and management systems is that the employees know what is wrong and what is unsafe. It's management who often misunderstand or do not know what the real requirements are, especially of legislation. And I now in South Africa focus on just management, CEO, heads of department training, so that they can understand the repercussions of the decisions they make, the budgets they allocate, and the decisions in terms of work practices that they issue. And at the end of the day, we can increase education at that high level, the government level and the management level of organizations. So we're going to look a lot further than sort of a lower level wellness office involved in health and safety training. And then obviously benefits to this, we need support for all of these people who are implementing the system. Alright? First, two things. The first one is your international development partners. Okay? So I've obviously been working with GIZ, so I will talk to that. But in South Africa, we don't have a lot of that in our country. We don't have international support. We've, to a large degree, had to do it ourselves. So you do have the benefit of Bangladesh of making use of these international development partners and having that skill and expertise at your disposal. But more than that, they can actually hire the manpower to come And I think that for you is a great stepping stone, because what more do you need in terms of support than people who know and can give you the practical experience. And then lastly, in South Africa, and this is just a suggestion for Bangladesh, we as a profession, in terms of health and safety people, we call ourselves practitioners, we haven't, as I said, had a good support base. There's been a lot of government focus, a lot of organizational focus. But as a health and safety person, there isn't a lot of support. You can't even study health and safety in South Africa, and that seems to shock a lot of people. So what we've done as an institute, or as a group of people, is develop our own institutions and associations as a support network for people who work in the health and safety industry. So people or groups like the Institute of Safety Management, the Occupational Safety Practitioners Council, they basically meet at regular intervals. They hold workshops. They disseminate information via the internet, via newsletters. We have question and answer forums, web-based question and answer forums, with people who maybe are new to the industry or want to found something with people who've been in the industry longer. This basic information sharing and problem-solving approach has done wonders for our industry. We went from a group of practitioners who were kind of fumbling our way in the dark with new legislation to a very strong group of individuals who are now actually being contracted to work all over the world, because we have that strong knowledge of our legislation and what basic practical implementation we can do in certain aspects of the work we're doing. And I myself have worked from petrochemicals, manufacturing, to construction, you name it, and it's because of these exposures to the problem solving and this joint information sharing. To finish off there before we have a heart attack, alright? We still have a long way to go in South Africa, and I will admit that. We are by no means perfect and no means doing our best. We have a long path to look before we get to what I can call success. But when I did my research on Bangladesh, and when I understood what similarities we had as countries, it seems a little bit obvious that the path that South Africa has walked and has challenges and barriers along the way would be a good guide for Bangladesh to follow in terms of what works and what doesn't work. Because some of the things we did didn't work, but most of the things we've done have worked. So my suggestion is make the use of your support in terms of international partners. Make the use of your own skills by networking and information sharing. But most of all, see the bigger picture when it comes to health and safety.
Thank you very much, Christina. That was a very useful talk. Can I just, Christina, I think there's an advantage, because I think two of our speakers aren't here, but can I just double check that Roy Ramesh and Moshe Fanika aren't in the audience? No, they're not. Okay. So
why you stop rushing me?
And I just wanted to pick up on one of your points, which I thought was very significant in the context of Bangladesh, is the fact that often what you find is employers find quick fix solutions rather than looking at management systems. The management systems is crucial to occupational safety and health. And when you look to why that is the case, why is it that employers don't have proper management systems to deal with occupational safety and health, you just have to look at the Bangladesh Labour Act, which has no obligation at all on employers to provide instructions, training, information, or safe systems of work. And that's one of the weaknesses of the legislation. But I'm sure we can discuss that a bit later. But let me right now introduce Saeed Mozam Hussain, who is the advisor health at the ISO.
Okay, to start off with, there might be some overlap with Christina's presentations because I will be talking in line with what she has said. We'll be touching on the OHS 18001 standard, and maybe if we would have made joint presentation, it would have been more fruitful. But let's move forward. So recently, what we have seen in Bangladesh, starting from Tazrin garments, fire to the Rana Plaza collapse. After one incident, it's a trigger to be reactive. After Tazrin fire, there was this whole push for fire safety, and after the building collapse, you start looking at the building code. But all of these, we have to say, are reactions to certain stuff. So, could we have a more comprehensive approach to OHS? So, to start off with, these are the global and national figures on occupational health and safety. As you can see, I'm not going to read out all the numbers. Let's take note on the point 3. 6,300 people die as a result of occupational health and occupation accidents or work-related diseases, more than 2.3 million deaths per year. So these numbers are quite significant. If we compare these numbers to the maternal mortality rates and child mortality rates, these figures are in no way insignificant. If you look at the Bangladesh scenario, although we have to admit there are quite lack of data, in 2012 there was a study conducted by Bills, and it says there were 906 deaths in Bangladesh and more than 1,000 injuries, but many more incidents go unreported. If we were to look at the OHS scenario in Bangladesh, Mr. David pointed out, there is no overarching OHS policy in Bangladesh at this moment. OHS regulations are very fragmented because you have the OHS policy under Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Labor does something, Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Commerce and Industries have jurisdiction on the other. So it is not a coherent system. And from one industry to the other, there are varying practices. You cannot compare one, let's say, the garment industry to the leather industry because they have varying approaches to the occupational health and safety system, which results in the disasters we see. The Tazrin fire, the Rana Plaza collapse, and we have injured workers maybe in some shipbreaking yard somewhere. And as a consequence, the workers who survive and who are injured are in the risk of losing their livelihood, which affects their economic prosperity. Christina also mentioned this in her presentation. And in most cases, this has a further economic complications. In most cases, the treatment of these injured workers have to be borne by the family. This has a further consequence on the economic impoverishment of their families. In the long term, their families are pushed into poverty. But the truth is, if you look at all of these injuries, all of the root causes of these injuries, we would be able to see that 90%, 98% of all the accidents are preventable. Meaning, of those 2.3 million deaths, 98% would have been preventable, meaning quite a lot of lives saved. The solution, what could be a solution? The platform would be to have a holistic approach, to have some sort of approach like the OHS 18001 series. And at times, also it is not well communicated to the business community. If you have a holistic approach, it not only saves the lives of the workers, but it also pays off in the long run. It does make good business sense in investing in occupational health and safety of the workers and in the industry as a whole. And what can the government play? The government's role could be to have to set the regulatory framework for comprehensive OHS implementation. Now, we have the experience of working with a shipyard. Shipyard is by nature more prone to injuries, and in the title you can see I've written Impact 99%, the OHS story of WMS. The 99% might be a bit puzzling, but I'll come to that. Before going on into the details, let's have a look at what this shipyard is. It is a shipyard based in Chittagong. It is very near the city. From the city by boat it takes 10 minutes, so it is in a peri-urban area. It produces ocean-going vessels for the European market, and on an average it employs 2,000 workers, and on peak season there is 3,005 workers working for Western Marine. So why are we talking about Western Marine? Was anything different in Western Marine? The situation was quite the same. And if you can see the injury statistics at Western Marine, I would like to highlight on July 2010, this bar over here. If you can see from the back, in July 2010, they had around 1,100 injuries. If we average it out, it would be around 1,000 injuries per month. The 1,000 injuries per month means quite a lot. So, what did Western Marine do to reduce these numbers? What was their approach? Western Marine's approach to OHS, as mentioned earlier, the OHS 18001, they adopted the OHS 18001 system along with the ISO 14001 guidelines. This ensured that Western Marine complies with and implements not only your traditional laws, the labor laws and the building code, but also other rules such as gas cylinder rule, environment conservation rules, and a host of others. These are one of the list of the laws with which Western Marine complied with. So these were all the laws that were stock taken and seen where they have to comply with. And what was the these were the steps taken. They developed and adopted an OHS policy in line of the draft OHS policy 2010. The draft was there and it is still there with the Ministry of Health since 2010. They had a team dedicated of OHS advisors, comprising of 1 OHS advisor and 24 safety representatives. The senior management, up to the managing director, was highly involved with all the proceedings of that program. They did pre-employment annual medical surveillance, and training was the core of the change that subsequently was put into place in Western Marine. So if we were to go through a process, first was the policy, and from the policy they did the planning, from planning implementation, and then checking, review, and continuous improvement. You again go back. It's a cycle, so you do not stop. You are always trying to improve the system. And the results were, if I were to go back to July 2010, 1100, August 2010, around 10. So from 1000 to 10 is a 99% decrease of injuries. So hence impact 99%. So that's in, and Christina also mentioned it takes time. It was not that easy. It took them more than a year and a half to reach that level, and still it is continuing. They still have an average injury rate of 5, 6, 7, not more than that. And what are the economic benefits? They had to invest a lot of manpower, they had to invest in changing the infrastructure, and these are the benefits they will be reaping. They obtained a certification, the OHS 18001 and ISO 14001 certifications. These certifications enable them to bid for government orders in Europe. It also enables Western Marine to work with international companies based in Bangladesh. And as you can see, from 1100 to 10, you would obviously have a reduction in medical costs. So that was also something which was significant. And if workers are not injured, there is less absenteeism. And in the process of being injured, the workers also accidentally do some damage to the property, and that was also avoided. And most important, if a worker is injured, needs a stay, he is given sick leave for 2 or 3 days. A sick leave of 2 or 3 days per worker means work loss. So all of these were avoided. And so from the development partner side, that is we from GIZ, what we have done is we have taken this experience that we have generated from working with the Western Marine Shipyard, and we have facilitated in the production of a toolkit which would basically enable any industry or any factory in Bangladesh to adopt or to have the same approach as Western Marine. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to take you from that a couple of interesting things. What was the name of the company again? Western Marine, yes. I mean, what was interesting to me about that is that they see that, please tell me if I'm wrong, is that they made the change voluntarily. It isn't the result of feeling a need to comply with the law because enforcement could take place, they could be subject to fines, or they could be subject to any other sanctions. I mean, how many of those injuries that took place to those workers were investigated by the factory, by the inspector in the factories? I'm sure none of them. how many of those were actually reported to the inspector? Probably very few, probably very limited number. So that is one interesting issue, is about voluntarism versus enforcement, versus state enforcement, and what is the real levers for change. But why was it that this particular company wanted to make the changes? It appears that this particular company saw opportunities for improved business. That must have been one of the levers. Perhaps they were concerned about the position of their workforce, no doubt, but I'm sure that the big inducement to them was that they could access better business, which is all well and good for companies that are involved in the international market, where there are so many employers and businesses in Bangladesh that do not have a connection to the international market. So what is their inducement to make these changes? So anyway, I just thought I'd just make that comment. Does anybody have any a long time for questions, which is great. Does anybody have any immediate questions? Yes, please. If you could introduce yourself.
My name is Habibur Rahman. I work for Development. I think there are three very interesting presentations, and what I understood, compliance of the rules and regulations are very important in aspect of the presentation. And as a Bangladeshi, I have experienced that, among others, compliance of rules and regulations in this context, in the industrial safety, security, a serious concern. And in 1998, I was working on developing a health insurance project for the industrial workers. And a very senior expert in the sector told me that I would not quote him who's giving introduction for identity, but what he said was that as far as the existence of rules, laws, and regulations are concerned, we are near the heaven. But as far as the implementation is concerned, I think the last part was not very positive. So I would not read that out. But I think these are very nice initiatives, discussions about Western Marine. Okay, but if I want to look at it critically, Western Marine is not a representative business institutions. I'm familiar with Western Marine because our company is also giving money to Western Marine for peacekeepers, etc. I think, and this morning I was listening to BBC. Kuwait is visiting government factories to see the two aspects. One is the fire conditions, and other is the architectural part of the buildings. So I think we have to go address the root cause of the problem. Why collapse like Rana Plaza happened? How we can avoid this kind of incident in the future to ensure safety of the workers? And how can we bring the owners of the industries or factories on board to make sure that they also appreciate the importance of safety of the workers, so that they become interested in complying with the regulations? If they make the journey shortcut, build a factory in a building which is not secure, which is not architecturally fit for the factory, no matter what you talk about, whatever motivation with them, it will happen again. So I think we should look at the core problem and see how we can address them, and then ask the government to ensure that there are no repetitions of what has happened. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that question. Basically, that's a question about, my understanding is, how do you get employers to comply with the law? Is it going to be through enforcement, or is it going to be through some other forms of voluntary compliance? And how is it that you're going to motivate employers to abide by appropriate standards?
Well, I'm just going to say from my point of view, we, as I said, my society that I come from is very self-serving. So organizations, given a choice of voluntary cooperation or enforcement. Unfortunately, when it came to voluntary, no organization, no business owner or manager wanted to spend that money because it is expensive and it does take time. And in terms of my society, nobody voluntarily wanted to opt in. So when it came to our sort of culture and our dynamic, it required enforcement. And I actually made a few notes, but I don't know what I said. What happened first was in our government, we made the laws, knowing that at the time that we wrote them, nobody would be able to comply. And gave a window period in which companies could then rectify themselves and right themselves to meet that deadline. And the minimum deadline for 18 months. So we're not talking a 6-month turnaround here, we're talking years that organizations were given. And again, it's that bigger picture, that long-term view in terms of success. So when you say that you're looking at building fire safety and architectural soundness of a building, and how do you get somebody to pick that up and why do you stop repetition? In our context, yes, it's still happening. Less than it used to be, but it is still happening. For us, it was about upskilling and educating our government inspectors, making sure that structural engineers were actually employed by the Department of Labor. So when they went to go do a labor inspection, they could see that there was a massive crack in the concrete slab and say something about it at that stage. So there was a crossover in terms of skills. So we weren't only going into workplaces to look at labor compliance and labor enforcement. We were going to look at fire safety and building safety, building codes, and the soundness of the building. So from my point of view, it's about getting your independent government